Welcome to 28 Days and Beyond,
where we talk about our history, our heritage, and our culture.
I'm Amari.
I'm Charisma. Welcome back, guys.
There it is.
Yes.
What's going on? How you doing?
I'm good. I'm just in a great mood.
Is that right?
Yes.
Any particular reason?
I had cookies.
That's what's up.
Yes.
The simple
what about
things
you?
in life.
How are you?
I'm doing all right. Doing all right. We have a serious topic today.
We do.
Right, what are we talking about?
We're talking about the MeToo movement.
Mm-hmm.
There's been, it's almost like every day when I turn on the news, when they're kind of covering this topic,
Yeah.
it spans so far in terms of where people stand regarding the movement. And I'll first start by saying I'm so happy that people that have been violated are finally feeling enough courage to come forward and say what's been happening to them, and also that that's not being met with no, that didn't happen, or
right.
you know, people being punished for speaking their truth and for telling, you know, what their experience has been. I've known people that have had awful experiences prior to this Me Too movement happening, where they were punished for coming forward when they were treated, when they were disrespected. I mean, it's really no way to tap dance around that. So now that this movement is finally here and people are finally being able to speak out, I think it's incredible. I only wish it had happened sooner.
Yeah, I mean, you know, I'm just amazed. It's like people used to play Antoine Dobson back in the day, right? When they say, hide your wife, hide your husband, hide your kids. They get everybody. Everybody. I mean, come on, the list just keeps growing. All people who, you know, Kevin Spacey, well, that was a shocker. You know, that one caught me off guard.
But there was it an episode of
House of Cards?
No, there was an episode of like Family Guy years ago.
Oh, really?
Yeah, because of course when I heard Kevin Spacey, I'm like, oh, what's gonna happen to all my House of Cards folks?
Of course.
But
they shut it down.
They did. Unfortunately for the people on the show, other than Kevin Spacey. But there was an episode of Family Guy where like Stewie fell out of like clothing or something from Kevin Spacey's basement. So they alluded to the fact that some really gross stuff was happening years before, you know, it came out.
But you know what's interesting? I mean, so the industry response seems to be like, yo, end of career.
Yeah.
That's it. And I mean, but there's a lot of people who are sort of implicated in that in terms of like, you know, folks who are working on the shows with them or so on and so. I mean, you know, the you use this word punishment. I'm wondering, is punishment the same as justice in these instances? And that's kind of really one of the larger issues that I see with this. You know, the situation, it seems like we want you to be punished, but is that justice for the folks
and I don't know, and I think it would depend, because some of these instances that we're hearing about now happened long ago.
Right.
And some of these instances that happened long ago were brought to the forefront and it was swept under the rug.
Yeah.
And now that this movement is here and everybody's like, you know what, you're not alone, this is happening to a lot of people.
Yeah.
And now that punishment is, you know, a real consequence of being a part of that. Now that's happening, but I understand what you're saying in terms of, But we have Dr. Lucky here today.
All right.
And she's going to be talking to us about this whole Me Too movement and kind of giving her perspective on it. So I can't wait to jump into it. But we do have to take a break here on 28 Days and Beyond, but we'll be back right after this.
Welcome back to 28 Days and Beyond. We're joined now by Dr. Crystal Lucky, who is an Associate Dean of Baccalaureate Studies. That's a mouthful.
Yes.
At Villanova University. Thank you for joining us.
Yes.
Thank you. I'm glad to be here. I'm
So tell us a little bit about what it is you do at Villanova.
So as you said, I'm Associate Dean of Baccalaureate Studies for the College of Arts and Sciences. I just assumed that position in August.
All
so
right.
Thank you.
Yes.
I'm really brand new at it, but I love the job. I work in various capacities with our undergraduate students and with faculty. Work a lot with the various committees that help to undertake a lot of the work of the College of Arts and Sciences, the kind of work that we cannot get done without our faculty, without the support and help of our faculty. A lot of times when students have to see me if they've got academic integrity violations and alcohol
that doesn't happen too often, though.
Doesn't happen that often, especially not with our wonderful students in the College of Arts and Sciences.
Of course.
But so, they can see me for the good things and for some of the not so good things. And it's really a range. And that's one of the reasons that I love the job, because my days are super busy and they're very varied. So I've been doing all kinds of stuff.
That's cool.
And then also I'm in the English department, and I've been a member of the English department for 21 years.
Wow.
So my specialty is African-American, 19th and 20th century African-American literature.
Nice.
Wow. Yeah. Well, speaking of the not so good things, Amari and I began the show talking about the MeToo movement and just all of the things that have been coming to light recently. We would love to hear your thoughts on the topic.
So I think we are at such a critical juncture, such an amazing moment for various reasons. And on the one hand, the stories that are coming out are often heartbreaking, and they are sometimes terrifying. When you hear about stories of powerful men who can sit behind their desk and hit a button and make doors lock. I mean, some of those kinds of stories literally have made my stomach turn.
Mine too.
I've thought about situations that I've been in as a young woman. It's interesting because in some ways it doesn't matter if you're young or old. And we're seeing that it doesn't matter what industry you're in as well, that when people are in power and they abuse that power, that it creates terrifying conditions for people to work in. And so what I was saying about how this is an amazing moment, that people are getting their stories told and they're feeling supported to be allowed to open their mouths and to have their voices heard. And that, for me, is extraordinary. And I think about my mother, who is in her late 70s and came to Philadelphia in the early 60s. And she's often told me the story of one summer she worked in New York, just trying to make some summer money to go back down to North Carolina. She was an undergraduate at Shaw University in Raleigh, North Carolina. And so she was working at some factory. I don't even remember what she was doing. But the supervisor hit on her and wanted her to go to lunch with him and made her very uncomfortable. And, my mom, in her way, she's just sort of quipped off at him, you're old enough to be my father, not knowing that it was going to be her last day on the job. Right. And so at the end of the day, she said he handed her check early. And she said, well, why are you giving me this? It's not payday. And he said, it's your payday. It's your last day. And she left. Well, then she left the factory or wherever she was. And she said she was going out to sit on the park bench and she was like trying to, kind of collect herself. And then she finds out that another young woman who she knew, who was at another close by institution, had experienced the same thing.
Wow.
And when my mom and I have talked about this, I tell her it's because of experiences that people like you had that now we're finally getting to the point where women and even some men are able to speak out and say, I have been harassed. I have been abused. I have suffered the indignities and injustices. And this is what, for me, makes me angry, that when folks experience certain kinds of, they experience these moments where they have felt vulnerable and they have felt like no one would listen to them.
Yeah, and that's the key.
And no one would believe them.
And that's the key, because so many of these instances have been happening for such a long time, and they're just now coming to the forefront, and they're just now starting to get the support that they're getting with the MeToo movement. And we want to keep this conversation going, but we have to take a little bit of a break. Okay. But we'll be back with more with Dr. Lucky right after this.
Welcome back to 28 Days and Beyond. We're here with Dr. Lucky. So one of the things that you were talking about, the story about your mother, but we all know that there's this culture, and it's kind of accepted, Hollywood or any industry, there are certain ways that, particularly men, will use their positions of power to get what it is that they want. My concern with the conversation as of late has been that folks are more concerned with, well, who did it? Well, we're going to ruin his career, but that's not intervening in the sort of cultural foundation of it, of patriarchy, of sexism, and so on and so forth. In other words, we are responding to it after it's happened. We're not doing anything that will prevent it from happening. What are some ways that we can do something like that?
So it's a great question. So on the one hand, I will say, I think that unfortunately, that is the sort of the characteristic of America, that we tend to react instead of preparing up front. We don't sort of educate and teach, and we don't prevent. We do a lot of reacting. And then on top of that, after we react and we ruin people's careers, and listen, don't get me wrong, I think some people's careers need to be ruined.
Oh, well,
Yeah,
no, that's
absolutely.
not right.
Folks who are in power,
Who've been
they need to
abusing
be
that
toppled,
power.
right?
Absolutely.
All the way up to the president, but anyway.
All the way. And I think that, so I don't want to make it out like I'm trying to protect people, but I think that, unfortunately, I think you're absolutely right. We spend too much time sort of reacting. So to get to your question, I think that one of the things that, so education, right? I think that we need to spend more and more time teaching our children, particularly our boys, about how they should be in the world, right? The way that they interact with girls and with other boys, right? That it's about respect. And I also think that we need to teach our young girls and our young women about how to respect themselves and about how to speak up and how to find people in their lives that are going to value them and protect them. Because one of the things that always, I was inappropriately touched in graduate school. But you know what? Because I had family and friends that I knew I could go to, I did not keep it silent. I called my mother. My mother told my father. I immediately told one of my best friends. And I worry at times that what happens in some cases, people don't know who to tell. And I want people to be empowered to be able to tell somebody, right? To know that somebody's got your back and not to have to suffer in silence. That's one of the things that makes, I think I said this a little earlier, but it's one of the things that makes me so sad to know that people have been treated unfairly, unjustly, and they have felt like they've had to keep their stories silent for sometimes literally a generation.
That's the sad thing. Unfortunately, prior to this movement, and I'm sure that it's still going to continue after, there are a lot of people that came forward, whether it was in a public platform, you know, if it had something to do with work or even things that have happened within their own families or communities. And then sometimes when these women are brave enough to come forward, or these people are brave enough to come forward, they're told to keep it silent. So for the people that don't have that support system, maybe at home or, you know, within their tight-knit community, knowing that there are other resources and people that they can talk to, I think is really, really important.
I agree with you. You know, I'm also, we didn't talk about this, but I'm a pastor, I'm a preacher, and this stuff goes on in the church, right? This is not just in the secular realm. This is in the church, and I'm happy to start to see. I mean, in some ways, it started becoming more and more public with the sex abuse scandal in the Catholic Church, and people became more and more empowered in spiritual communities also to be able to say no. People who are in power have been acting inappropriately, and it needs to stop. It needs to stop. People need to keep their hands to themselves. This is what we teach little children when they go to kindergarten.
Everything you need to know about life, you've learned on the playground.
I believe
on the playground. You learned in kindergarten, right? Play well with others. Don't run with scissors. Keep your hands to yourself.
Absolutely.
Right.
Dr. Lucky, we want to thank you for joining us. We'll be back with more 28 Days and Beyond.
Welcome back to 28 Days and Beyond. Man, I love Dr. Lucky.
Yeah, she was all right with me.
She said so many things that were just key. And I think the best thing that she said was that you learn what you need to learn on the playground.
Word.
That's so true. Just small things like keeping your hands to yourselves, you know, being kind to one another, having respect. And I think with the Me Too movement, the most important thing that's come from it, for me anyway, in my opinion, is really stumping out this antiquated notion of boys will be boys as it pertains to people being inappropriate and violating other human beings when there's a difference in power.
Word.
So yeah.
You know, I think the significance of the movement is very much in line with what you're always talking about. You know, representation matters. At the very least, you know, people are able to share what they've, as you know, Dr. Lucky said, have been holding on to generations or even generations.
Yeah.
That they're finally able to get these stories out. You know, one of the things that I'm interested in is the very thing that you just mentioned. If boys will be boys, that's a sort of systematic cultural understanding of how we're supposed to conduct ourselves. Oh, he didn't mean it, or oh, he's just, you know what I mean?
Even the stuff that we learn when we're kids, you know, like I remember being a kid and having someone say to me, oh, he hit you, that means he likes you.
Right, yeah, like that's not cool. That's not how we should, right, exactly. And hopefully, I mean, you know, maybe this could be a moment where things shift and we begin to, you know, root that out at the very root. You know what I'm saying? Because
I certainly hope so.
You start out that young and that's how you're raised and you believe, okay, well that's acceptable behavior and no one's really calling you out to the contrary.
Yeah, and you don't want to wait until you're so old and stuck in your ways that now when people are telling you, hey, that's inappropriate, it's hard for you to break out of that because you've been doing this inappropriate thing for so long that it's become a part of who you are. It's become a character trait, you know?
Certainly so.
We're getting some work done.
I mean, we certainly are, and hopefully we'll keep the conversation going. But right now, as always, it seems it's never long enough. We're out of time. But this has been another episode of 28 Days and Beyond,
where we talk about our history, our heritage, and our culture. We'll see you